the age of 4, I was destined to be buried alive. But I'm lucky to stand here before you today and share my story. A story of choices. Choices imposed on me, experienced by me, then made by me. An average 4-year-old enjoys a stable home, safety, and warm, nutritional meals. My childhood was very different. I'm a Kurdish genocide survivor from Saddam Hussein's era. I was born into the Iran and Iraq war, as well as persecution from Saddam Hussein for being Kurdish. I dodged mines, bombs, and bullets, and saw injured bodies that no child should see. I knew death was always around the corner. To this day, the sound of fireworks, a form of celebration. But for me and many conflict survivors, it resembles the sounds of dropping bombs and missiles. The day we were taken to prison is still ingrained in me in my memory. I was 4 years old, playing with my doll in my grandparents' garden, when there was a loud knock at the garden gates. It startled me, and I froze. I ran to my uncle, who went to open the door. And as he opened the door, there stood 2 Iraqi soldiers with an angry, stern look on their faces. They asked for my mother, and my uncle tried to deter them by saying that my parents had separated because of me. They looked down at me and said, "So this is the enemy's child?" And I could feel my uncle's hand tighten. He knew and feared what would happen next. When they took my mother, they put their hands behind my back and said, "We'll take her too." My family's cries and begging didn't help. Instead, they were told that if they followed, they would be shot on the spot. As a child, I didn't understand what was going on, but I understood danger. From such a young age, I knew to stay quiet and not say a word, because death was always around the corner. What followed was a few weeks in prison, women and children in one building, and men in another. We could hear the men being tortured, and I always feared for my grandfather. I later found out that he was tortured in the most unimaginable way. The day our names were called out, we thought we were going to be set free. It's only when the adults started screaming and wailing that I realized something worse was about to happen. As we were taken outside, the buses were there with 2 diggers in front of them. I didn't know then, but the diggers were there as a sign to tell us that we were going to be buried alive. The adults dropped to the soldiers' feet and kissed their feet and begged them not to kill us. We were being driven to our death. The buses we were herded onto had 2 diggers in front of them on purpose. It was a way to tell us how we would be buried alive. What they would do is they'd show you the diggers, they'd dig the hole, make everyone lie in there alive, and shovel soil over you slowly. It was meant to be a slow, torturous death. Once inside the buses, those screams and wails from the adults all turned into silent whispers and prayers. They had accepted that we were going to be killed. As a child, I had no choice. I had no power, no way of escaping, or even understanding our death. But the buses were intercepted by a miracle. A deal had been made outside, and the drivers were switched. We didn't know how. But as we carried on with our journey, the buses stopped. The drivers opened the doors and said, "We're Kurdish. We're not going to kill you. We're here to rescue you, but you need to disappear as if you're dead." Those drivers risked their lives. They made a choice. They made a choice for a busload of innocent people to save them. They made a choice for people like me that didn't have a choice. And thanks to them, I'm standing here in front of you today. In my young adult life, I faced another type of prison. My early marriage at the age of 19. Over 6 years, I lost my friends, my freedom, and my way of making decisions. Coercive control, a crime in the UK, stripped away my freedom, but also left me crippled in fear. I was afraid of speaking. I was afraid of looking at anyone. I was afraid of making my own decisions. He threatened me with death if ever I left, and I dared never to leave. The shame of such a marriage silenced me. Lifeless, ill, and only bound to keep my son alive. In 2008, there was a work event, and I really wanted to go because I'd never been before, and I wanted to show my face just so I wouldn't raise suspicion over my constant absence. So I begged him to let me go, and he agreed. But he gave me a camera and said, "Take photos of the night." I didn't understand, but I took the camera and I took photos. When I got home, the first thing he did was take the camera and look through the pictures. And there was a team photo with a man standing next to me. He fixated on this man and said, "Why is this man standing next to you?" And in that moment, I don't know why, everything just went silent and still. His shouting was silenced by my internal questions. I asked myself, "Taban, do you want to live like this for the rest of your life?" My answer was no. And with that, I looked at him and said, "I don't care if you kill me. I don't care if I die. I'm not spending one more day with you." That night, I decided that even if I died, I would still leave. I realized that I had a choice and only I could make that choice to act. Despite this being really hard in my culture, where divorce is looked on as a taboo and frowned upon, where gender-based violence is normalized, But for me, it wasn't normal and it wasn't healthy. So I made a choice of life. I chose to leave my abusive marriage. Scared to talk or look at anyone, scared to work, scared to be in social situations. I feared it all. But despite that, I knew that I was the only person that could make change happen. So what did I do? I made a list. I made a list of all the things that I needed to do to make action, to change things, to bring back my voice and help with my social anxiety. I signed up to a 12-week vocal skills class, which included drama. And in those 12 weeks, I wrote a monologue, I performed it on stage in front of an audience, and I won the competition. After coming off stage, I cried and realized that it was only me that could make things happen. It was only from the choices that I made. That gave me the confidence to work through my action list. I'd lost all my friends, so I went out of my way to rebuild my friend circle. And now I have friends all over the world. I was scared to work, but despite this, I applied for a job where I didn't even have the skills to do it. But I learned on the job. And it eventually became a career for me to support myself and my son. I even bought a home. By this point, age 32 in 2014, I realized it really was about making decisions, trusting my intuition and abilities, and knowing that everything is learnable. By this point, I'd become the master of stepping out of my comfort zone. After a talk on Genocide Remembrance Day at the House of Lords, I realized that I wanted to do something connected to my past and my childhood experiences. A bit like those drivers who rescued us, the choice that they made. How could I make a choice like them to help other people? This is when I entered the third stage of my life. In summer 2014, I left my city job in London and went back to Kurdistan, where ISIS had committed genocide against the Yazidis and caused a humanitarian crisis. I worked on the front lines and became very close to the women and girls that had seen horrific atrocities. When I came back to the UK after 15 months, there was no way that I could go back to a normal 9-to-5 job. I'd realized that I turned my pain into power, and now I had the choice to turn my power into purpose. So I chose to do something to help women and girls rebuild their lives after being impacted by conflict and displacement. In 2016, I founded the Lotus Flower with no money, no connections, and absolutely no way of knowing how I'd do it. So again, I did the same thing. I made a list. I made a list of all the things that I needed to make a dream into a reality. For money, I only knew one person that had donated £1,000 for another fundraising project. And I went to him and showed him exactly where his money went and how it had helped. I didn't realize that I was doing fundraising naturally. I needed £20,000 to start the Lotus Flower. So I asked him if he could donate £1,000, and 19 of his friends could donate £1,000 each too. Then he turned around and said, or I could give you 20,000. And at this point, he blew me away and I nearly choked on my sushi. I realized that people had money to give for good. It was the first time that I'd realized this. From the choice of life that he made and the decision that I made for starting the Lotus Flower in my living room, we've managed to impact 60,000 women and girls and community members in Iraq. Not only that, we started with 2 staff members in 2016, and we've now got nearly 200 local staff members on the ground. Our aim is to ensure that women and girls are safe, financially independent, and leaders in their own community. What I've realized is that life and death are outcomes of our choices. It can give you so much energy and resource if you're able to make the right choice. If it wasn't for those drivers who rescued us and the life choice that they made, I wouldn't be standing here today. If it wasn't for me who chose life and walked away from an abusive marriage, I wouldn't be standing here today. And if it wasn't for the choice of life for our first generous donor, then the Lotus Flower wouldn't be changing lives today. As a single mother who was ill, who had experienced so much trauma, I chose to give back and help women and girls rebuild their lives. Having our life in danger forces us to make choices. Why? Because sometimes there is no other choice. The ability to make a choice of life is always there. Maybe we're not obliged to wait for our death to make such a powerful act of liberation. So instead of waiting to face death, how about making a choice of life? What choice of life can you make that can help you make your life better, but also the lives of others? Thank you.